Hello, welcome, Safe Harbor, to another 12-minute Mark. Um, Going through Mark verse by verse every day as we meet together. Pray again that these are a blessing to you as you see the Word unfold, following Jesus in His own footsteps, day by day, line by line, getting to see Him in action here in the Gospel of Mark. As I've mentioned before, the Gospel of Mark is the most graphic and vivid of the Gospels. It has the most detail concerning the excitement and the emotion behind all the stories and the miracles. And today is definitely no exception to that. We see a story that we also see in Matthew, but again, Mark paints us the picture. Mark is the gospel writer who tells the story around the campfire, that it is an oral story that was spoken. And just like when you tell a story, you're trying to get someone to feel as if they were there. That's what Mark does. Luke and Matthew and John, all great writers, but they write out a document in the way we would normally see a thesis or an article written, where Mark is just a very verbal punch of action by action, what's taking place. And here we'll be just getting into chapter 9 today. And have you ever had what you might call a mountaintop experience, and then it seems like almost immediately you come crashing down off that mountain? I've worked with a lot of kids and youth over the years, and they'll go to summer camp and they'll have those wonderful spiritual experiences, those commitments that they'll make, and then they come home, and sometimes it seems like Satan's just waiting for them to come home, that they can easily come crashing down. And that's really what we have here. We're coming off of our last episode with the Mount of Transfiguration, where you have Peter, James, and John with Jesus, and then Moses and Elijah appear. Jesus is transfigured. The voice of the Father comes down. "This is my Son. Listen to him." Those three words we really need to pay attention to. And it's just, you can imagine, they're coming down the mountain. Peter says, "Wait, let's build some tents. Let's hang out here. This is the place. This is camp. This is camp right here. Let's camp here for the summer. This is where spiritual things happen." And then as soon as they get to the bottom of the mountain, this next story happens. And it's just that crash that we get to at the bottom of the mountain. Well, it says, after they are coming down from the mountain, they see the other disciples arguing with the Pharisees and a crowd around them. And when Jesus sees them arguing, he asks them, "What are you arguing about?" And so a man in the crowd speaks up and says, "Teacher, I brought my son to you because he's been possessed by an evil spirit. It's robbed him of speech. It seizes him. It throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth. He becomes stiff and gnashes his teeth, and he's rigid. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they could not. O unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." When the spirit saw Jesus, it convulsed him again violently. It threw him to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "Since childhood. It's often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, please take pity on us. Help us." "If you can?" asked Jesus. "Everything is possible for him who believes." "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and dumb spirit, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, it convulsed him violently, and came out of him. And the boy looked so much like a corpse that many standing there said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand, helped him up to his feet. And when the disciples went back into the house with Jesus, they said, "Well, why couldn't we cast him out?" He said, "This kind can only come out through prayer." There's the crashing down. You get this great spiritual experience on the mountaintop. See the Father, Son, and the Spirit all at once, and everything seems to be going perfect. How could anything go wrong now? And then they get to the bottom, and it's just the same old arguments among religious people, while other people lay there hurting, distressed. It's a sad picture of what can happen. And as Jesus, of course, comes right to the scene as the crowds come on, he's not interested in talking about the wonderful experience he's had. He's already told the other apostles not to talk about it until he's risen from the dead. But he's concerned for what's going on. And this man who had brought his son, just explains the situation. And talking to those of us who have children, the kind of despairing heartache you have when your children are suffering and there's maybe nothing that you're able to do to help at that time. You can relate to that. We've had children in the hospital, and it's just, there's no feeling like that. And this man comes in faith and takes him to, he said, brought him to you, meaning him or his disciples. And the 9 disciples there, they couldn't cast it out, and obviously there's some now argument going on with the Pharisees. And what we get then is that vivid picture, all the descriptions of the demonic possession. And this is what Hollywood has used. This particular story is what Hollywood has used to depict the kind of demonic possession that we have, the very graphic, detailed, horrific type of a spiritual torment that the young boy is going through. And so Jesus, he's not interested in the arguments of the religious folk going on. He's not trying to help. Who's going to win this argument? He doesn't get on to the Pharisees. How dare you try to argue with my disciples? Or he doesn't get on to the disciples and say, well, why are you arguing with them? He goes straight for, bring the boy to me. And the man goes into, again, another explanation, saying that this spirit is trying to literally kill him. And as Jesus, says, how long? How long have you had to suffer with this? It's an interesting question that Jesus asks, but it shows kind of the care for the Father and what he's been going through. And then again, before a crowd gathers, Jesus is trying to heal the boy and rebukes the spirit. But right before he comes out, there's this exchange with the Father that's really interesting. Because as the Father explains the despair that he's in and the hopelessness of his son being healed, he says, if you can do anything, would you please help us? And this is a little known verse because this same exact story appears in Matthew, and it's normally Matthew's version that we see, and it doesn't have this little line in it where Jesus responds and says, if you can. I'd love to know the inflection that Jesus used when he said that, but he's wondering, does the man really believe that Jesus can heal his son? And then the great line, anything is possible for him who believes. Because the belief is what ties to the power of God's will. That's what makes that spiritual connection, that God's will break forth. And then the man's response, and I've heard many people comment over the years about this phrase, and I think this is a prayer that we can even pray here. Lord, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. It's a beautiful statement of faith that is afraid of perhaps being overconfident or arrogant, maybe, but it's the heart cry of a father who has seen his son in torment throughout the son's whole life. How many years has this been a problem? The constant watching after the son who is, constantly going under this torment. And he hasn't given up faith, or he wouldn't have brought his son to Jesus to begin with. So there's enough faith to take action. But the man has been humbled over the years in his faith, and he says, help me overcome my unbelief. That's a great confession. We confess our faith. We talk about what we believe, but also there are things where we have unbelief, and a simple prayer, a wonderful, honest prayer to Jesus. Help me overcome my unbelief. And so Jesus does the exorcism. Again, we see the violent, graphic display, and so much that the people think he's dead, but of course Jesus helps him up. The disciples, why couldn't we cast him out? And Jesus' response, this kind can only come out by prayer. Perhaps they were trying to just do some sort of a ritualistic exorcism. Exorcisms were practiced in that day in Jesus' time by many people. It wasn't something that was very successful unless Jesus was doing it, but perhaps they had not really paid attention to the prayer part, to, again, prayer tying them to the power of God. And so this wonderful prayer that amid the difficulties of life, that's one you should still be praying. I still pray it. Lord, I believe, but help me also overcome where I have unbelief. We'll see you next time for a 12-Minute Mark.